Life in Seville passed with apparent normality. The sun caressed the white facades of the houses, and the aroma of orange blossom permeated the narrow streets of the Santa Cruz neighborhood. I, Valeria, enjoyed my daily routine with my husband Alvaro. Our apartment, a cozy apartment in a restored old building, was our little paradise. That spring morning began like any other. I got up early, made coffee and toast, and woke up Alvaro with a soft kiss on the cheek. "Good morning, sweetheart," I whispered as he slowly opened his eyes, smiling sleepily. We had breakfast together on the terrace, chatting about our plans for the day. Alvaro mentioned an important meeting in his office, and I told him about a new design project that was about to start. Everything seemed perfect, as always. "I'll see you at night, love," Alvaro said goodbye, giving me a kiss before leaving. I stayed home, working in my makeshift studio in the guest room. The hours flew by as I dove into sketches and color swatches. It was around noon when I heard a crash coming from the entrance. At first, I thought it was Alvaro returning for something he had forgotten. But when I looked out into the hallway, I was paralyzed. There, at the threshold of our door, was Vega, my mother-in-law. Her bright blonde dyed hair contrasted with her wrinkled face and stern expression. Around him, a pile of suitcases of various sizes formed an improvised barricade. "Valeria," he exclaimed with a shrill voice that made me shudder. "It's good that you're home. Come, help me with the suitcases." I blinked, confused. "Vega, what are you doing here? We didn't know you were coming to visit." She let out a laugh that sounded more like a squawk. "Visitor? Oh, no, dear. I'm moving here. Permanently." I felt like the ground was moving under my feet. "How are you moving?" But we haven't talked about this. Alvaro hasn't told me anything." Vega made a dismissive gesture with her hand. Details. Alvaro agrees, of course. She is his mother, after all. "Now, are you going to help me with these suitcases, or are you going to just stand there like a statue?" Mechanically, I walked over and started dragging the suitcases inside. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and mixed emotions. Why hadn't Alvaro consulted me? How were we going to handle this situation? As the hours passed, Vega took over every corner of our home. He placed his photos on the shelves, his decorations on the tables, and even hung a horrible tapestry on the living room wall. I watched in silence, feeling like my personal space was being invaded mercilessly. When Alvaro arrived that night, I ran to meet him, waiting for an explanation. But to my surprise, he smiled widely when he saw his mother. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." "Alvaro," I whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Can we talk for a moment?" We retreated to the kitchen, where I asked him quietly, "Did you know your mother was moving in with us? Why didn't you tell me?" He looked at me with an expression that mixed guilt and determination. "I'm sorry, honey. I know I should have told you sooner. But Mom needs our help. Her house in town is for sale, and she has nowhere else to go. It'll only be for a while, I promise." I wanted to protest, to tell him that we should have discussed this together, as a couple. But Vega's voice echoed from the living room. "Alvaro, come see how I've redecorated your horrible living room." I watched as my husband rushed to answer his mother's call, leaving me alone in the kitchen. In that moment, I felt that something fundamental had changed in our relationship. It was no longer just Alvaro and I, now it was Alvaro, Vega, and me. And I had a feeling that this change would not bring anything good. That night, as I lay awake in bed, listening to Alvaro's snoring and the occasional creak of the bed in the guest room where Vega had settled, I couldn't help but wonder, how had I gone from having a perfect life to feeling like a poor one? Strange in my own home in a matter of hours. The next morning dawned with palpable tension in the air. I got up early, hoping to have a moment of peace before Vega took control of the house. However, my hopes were quickly dashed when I found her already in the living room, moving furniture and hanging pictures. "Good morning, Valeria," she said without looking at me, focused on hanging a huge portrait of herself over our sofa. "I hope you don't mind, but this room was in dire need of a feminine touch." I stood dumbfounded, watching our cozy living room transform into what looked like the set of a tacky soap opera. The cushions he had carefully chosen were replaced with brightly colored ones with sequins. The natural linen curtains that I loved so much lay on the floor, replaced by dark red velvet ones. Vega, I began, trying to stay calm, I think we should talk about these changes. This is our house and… Oh, dear, he interrupted with a condescending smile, don't worry. I know you have peculiar taste. But trust me, this will turn out much better. Besides, now that I live here, it's my home too, no? I felt my blood boil, but before I could respond, Alvaro left the room, yawning and stretching. Mom, he exclaimed enthusiastically when he saw the room. What a wonderful change. You've always had a gift for decorating. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Didn't Alvaro remember the afternoons we spent together choosing every piece of furniture, every detail of our house? Alvaro, I said, pulling his arm to take him to the kitchen, can we talk for a moment? Once in the kitchen, I whispered urgently, what's going on? Your mother is changing our entire house without consulting us. Don't you think we should have a say in this? Alvaro looked at me with an expression that mixed guilt and confusion. Come on, Valeria, it's not that big of a deal. Mom just wants to feel at home. Besides, some changes won't hurt us, don't you think? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where was the man who used to support me in everything? But Alvaro, I insisted, this is our house. We choose everything together. Don't those memories mean anything to you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Of course, honey. But they're just things. The important thing is that we're together, right? And now with Mom here, we're a bigger family. We have to adapt. I returned to the living room, feeling defeated. Vega continued her redecorating work, humming happily as she placed porcelain figurines on every available surface. Oh, dear, he said when he saw me, since you're here, could you help me move this couch? I think it would look better by the window. Mechanically, I reached out to help, even though every fiber of my being screamed in protest. As we moved the heavy piece of furniture, I couldn't help but notice how the legs scratched the hardwood floor that we had worked so hard to restore. Vega, I tried once again, perhaps we should consult with Alvaro before making such drastic changes. She gave a laugh that sounded more like a squawk. Oh, Valeria, don't be so old-fashioned. Alvaro trusts my judgment. It's always been that way. As if he had summoned him, Alvaro appeared in the living room, dressed to go to work. Wow, Mom. The living room looks amazing. You need to teach Valeria some decorating tricks. I felt something break inside me. Did my opinion no longer matter at all? Alvaro, I said, trying to maintain my composure, can we talk for a moment before you leave? He glanced at his watch impatiently. Sorry, honey, I'm late. We'll talk tonight, okay? And with that, he left, leaving me alone with Vega and her new living room. I spent the rest of the day watching, in disbelief, as Vega continued her conquest of our home. Every room, every corner, was a victim of his personal touch. My books were relegated to boxes to make room for his collection of gossip magazines. My plants were replaced with plastic flowers because, according to her, they are less work. When Alvaro returned that night, the transformation was almost complete. Our house, once a reflection of our life together, now looked like the set of a 1970s television show. Mom, it's incredible, Alvaro exclaimed, looking around in admiration. You have done wonders in just one day. I couldn't take it anymore. Alvaro, I said, trying to stay calm, can we talk in private, please? We retreated to the kitchen, the only place Vega hadn't touched yet. Don't you realize what's happening? I asked him. Your mother is taking control of our house, of our lives. Why do you support her in this? Alvaro looked at me with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. Valeria, I think you're exaggerating. Mom just wants to help. Besides, the house looks great now, don't you think? I felt tears threatening to come, but I held them back. Great. Alvaro, this doesn't feel like our house anymore. Where are our things, our memories? He sighed, clearly frustrated. They are just objects, Valeria. The important thing is that we are together, that we are a family. Can't you just accept the changes and be happy? At that moment, I realized I was fighting a losing battle. Alvaro had chosen his side, and it was not mine. The next few days were hell. Every morning I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare, only to be faced with the stark reality that my home no longer belonged to me. Vega had taken full control, and Alvaro seemed more than happy to allow it. One afternoon, while I was trying to work in my studio, the only space that still retained some of my essence, I heard Vega and Alvaro talking quietly in the living room. I'm not normally one to eavesdrop, but something in his tones alerted me. I quietly approached the half-open door. "Son," Vega said in a honeyed voice, "you know that I love you more than anything in this world. And that's why I have to tell you something important." "What's wrong, Mom?" Alvaro responded, with a worried tone. "It's about Valeria," she continued. "I think she is not the right woman for you. Look how she has behaved since I arrived. She has no respect for family, for traditions. A son should be with his mother, and she doesn't understand that." I felt my heart stop. How dare he? I waited, holding my breath, for Alvaro's response. Surely he would defend me, right? "Well, Mom," he began doubtfully, "Valeria is my wife. I love her." "Oh, honey," Vega interrupted, "love isn't everything. You need a woman who understands the value of family, who supports you unconditionally. And Valeria, well, you've seen what it's like." I couldn't take it anymore. I entered the room, shaking with rage. "How dare you?" I shouted, looking directly at Vega. "This is my house, my life. You have no right to interfere like this." Vega stood up, standing up to her full height. His face, normally wrinkled into a fake smile, now showed its true nature. "Your house," he spat. "This house belongs to my son. And I am his mother. You are just an intruder who has been occupying a place that does not belong to you." I turned to Alvaro, waiting for him to finally react, to defend me. But he was just there, sitting, with a look of confusion and conflict on his face. "Alvaro," I begged, "say something. Are you going to allow your mother to talk to me like that?" He stood up slowly, and for a moment I thought he was going to take my side. But then, with a soft but firm voice, he said, "Valeria, I think you should calm down. Mom only wants the best for us." I felt like I had been slapped. "What's best for us?" I repeated, incredulously. "How can it be the best that your mother insults me and tries to kick us out of our own house?" Vega stepped forward, her face contorted into a grimace of triumph. "No, dear. I'm not kicking them both out. Just you. This house is now mine and my son's. You are no longer welcome here." I gasped, unable to believe what I was hearing. I looked at Alvaro, waiting, praying that he would contradict his mother. But he was just there, with that stupid smile on his face, like this was all perfectly normal. "Alvaro?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Are you really going to allow this?" He approached me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Valeria, honey, maybe it's for the best. Mom is right, we've been having problems lately. Maybe we need some time apart to think things over." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was not the man I had married, the man who swore to love me and protect me. This was a stranger, a puppet manipulated by his mother's strings. I felt anger and betrayal wash over me. Without thinking twice, I took off my wedding ring and threw it at Alvaro's feet. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "If that's what you want, I'll leave. But I warn you, Alvaro, you and your mother will regret this decision." Vega gave a mocking laugh. "Oh, dear, are you threatening us? What could you do against us?" I stared at her, allowing all my fury and contempt to show in my eyes. "Don't underestimate me, Vega. Neither should you, Alvaro. They have no idea who I really am or what I'm capable of." With those words, I turned around and headed to our room. No, it wasn't ours anymore. It was just mine now, to start packing my things. As I packed clothes into a suitcase, the tears I had been holding back finally began to fall. They were not tears of sadness, but of rage, of frustration, of betrayal. But as I packed, a strange calm began to take over me. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe this was the push I needed to rediscover who I really was, outside the shadow of Alvaro and his family. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new and exciting. With every piece of clothing I folded, with every personal item I put away, I felt like I was freeing myself. She was no longer Alvaro's submissive wife, Vega's tolerant daughter-in-law. It was Valeria, and she was about to show everyone who she really was. With trembling hands, I closed the last suitcase. The room I once shared with Alvaro now seemed empty and cold. I looked around one last time, allowing myself a moment of nostalgia before facing my new reality. Just as I was about to drag my suitcases towards the door, an unexpected sound broke the tense silence of the house. The soft but unmistakable roar of a powerful engine, followed by the crunch of gravel under the tires. A car had just arrived. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? Had Alvaro called someone to escort me out of the house? The idea filled me with a new wave of indignation. Cautiously, I approached the window of the room that faced the street. What I saw took my breath away. There, parked in front of our house, no, it wasn't our house anymore, was a shiny black limousine. The vehicle was so long that it took up almost the entire front of the property. Its bodywork shone in the afternoon sun, reflecting the colors of the sky like a dark mirror. What the hell? I muttered to myself, unable to look away. I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway and Vega's shrill voice, "Alvaro, Alvaro, did you see that? There's a limousine on the street." "I know, Mom, I'm seeing it," Alvaro responded, his voice tinged with wonder and perhaps a touch of worry. I stood motionless, my forehead pressed against the cold glass of the window, watching the scene unfolding in the street. The driver, a tall, elegant man dressed in a crisp black suit, exited the vehicle and walked around the limo to open the rear door. Time seemed to stand still as he waited to see who would come out. Would it be some important politician? A wealthy businessman? Or maybe a movie star who had gotten lost in our modest neighborhood? I heard someone knocking at the front door. Vega and Alvaro were murmuring in low voices, apparently arguing over who should open the door. Finally, Alvaro's footsteps echoed in the hallway, approaching the entrance. The sound of the door opening reached my ears, followed by absolute silence. Curiosity got the better of my wounded pride, and I left the room to see what was happening. From my position at the top of the stairs, I could see Alvaro's back at the door. He was completely still, as if he had turned to stone. Vega, standing behind him, craned her neck trying to see who the mysterious visitor was. "Good afternoon," said a deep, familiar voice from the other side of the door. "I'm looking for Valeria. Is she at home?" That voice. It couldn't be. It was impossible. I hadn't heard it in years, but I would recognize it anywhere. It was a voice that transported me to my childhood, to moments of joy and also sadness. It was my father's voice. Without thinking twice, I ran down the stairs, gently pushing Alvaro and Vega so I could see with my own eyes. And there he was. Ramon, my father. Tall, elegant, with grey hair combed back and that distinguished bearing that had always characterized him. His eyes, the same hazel color as mine, shone when he saw me. "Dad," I whispered, feeling my legs give out. He smiled, that warm smile I remembered from my childhood. "Valeria, my little one. It's been so long." Without caring about the presence of Alvaro or Vega, I threw myself into my father's arms. He wrapped me in a tight hug, and for a moment, I felt like a child again, protected and loved. "What are you doing here?" I asked when we finally broke apart, wiping away the tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. Ramon looked over my shoulder, his expression turning serious as he saw Alvaro and Vega. "I've come to look for you, daughter. I think it's time for you to come home." I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, relief, and a hint of resentment for all the years of absence. But most of all, I felt hope. A hope that I thought was lost just a few minutes ago. Alvaro finally seemed to come out of his stupor. "Excuse me, sir, but who exactly are you?" My father looked at him with a mixture of disdain and pity. "I am Ramon Mendoza, Valeria's father. And from what I see, I have arrived just in time." Vega stepped forward, her face a mask of false kindness. "Mr. Mendoza, what a pleasant surprise. We didn't know that Valeria had, well, contact with her family." The look my father gave him could have frozen hell over. "There are many things you don't know about my daughter, and I think it's better that way." I turned to Alvaro and Vega, feeling a new strength running through my veins. Well, it looks like I won't have to worry about where to go after all. If you'll excuse me, I'll go get my bags. As I walked up the stairs, I heard my father say, "I'll help you with your luggage. And then, Valeria and I will have a lot to talk about." As I walked down the stairs with my suitcases, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The presence of my father, Ramon, had completely changed the panorama of what I believed would be a day of humiliation and defeat. As I reached the lobby, I saw my father standing, imposing and elegant in his custom-made suit. His presence filled the room in a way that made Álvaro and Veiga seem insignificant in comparison. Ramon approached me, taking the suitcases from my hands with a warm smile. "Let me help you with that, honey," he said, his voice soft but firm. Álvaro, who until then had been silent, seemed to wake up from his stupor. "Valeria," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "what is going on? Who is this man really?" I turned to him, feeling a mixture of pity and contempt. "He already told you, Álvaro. He is my father, Ramon Mendoza." Veiga, unable to contain her curiosity and probably her greed, took a step forward. "Mendoza? Like the Mendozas of Madrid? The owners of—" "Yes, my father interrupted in a sharp tone. "Those Mendozas. Although I doubt that's any of their business." I watched as Veiga's eyes widened, a mix of greed and regret dancing in them. Álvaro, for his part, seemed increasingly confused and alarmed. "But Valeria," he said, approaching me, "you never told me about your family. I thought you were an orphan, that you had grown up in an orphanage." I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly suppressed it. "You never really asked, Álvaro. You assumed things and I had my reasons for not correcting you." My father put a protective hand on my shoulder. "Valeria and I have a complicated history, young man. A history that, frankly, does not concern you. Now, if you will excuse us, we have a lot to talk about." We began to walk towards the door, but Álvaro, in a last desperate attempt, stood in our way. "Valeria, please don't leave like this. We can talk about this, we can fix it. I love you, remember?" For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. After all, this was the man I had shared the last years of my life with. But then, I remembered how he had sided with his mother, how he had allowed me to be kicked out of my own home. "I'm sorry, Álvaro," I said, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. "But love is not everything. You showed me that today." With that, we left the house. The fresh air of the Sevillian afternoon hit my face, bringing with it a feeling of freedom that I had not experienced in a long time. The driver, who had been waiting patiently next to the limousine, rushed to take my bags and put them in the trunk. My father opened the back door of the vehicle for me, waiting for me to enter. Before doing so, I stopped and looked back. Álvaro and Veiga were at the door, watching us. He seemed devastated, as if he only now realized what he had lost. She, on the other hand, had a calculating expression, probably thinking about how she could have taken advantage of the situation if she had known who I really was. "Bye," I murmured, more to myself than to them, and entered the limo. The interior of the vehicle was as luxurious as one would expect. Soft leather seats, a small drinks bar, and even a television screen. My father entered after me, sitting next to me. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The engine purred softly as the driver started, and soon we were leaving behind the house that had been my home for the past few years. "Valeria," my father began, his voice soft but charged with emotion. "I know we have a lot to talk about, a lot to explain. But first of all, I want you to know that I have missed you every day since you left." I felt the tears threatening to come again. "I've missed you too, Dad," I responded, my voice barely above a whisper. "But, why now? How did you know where to find me?" Ramon smiled, a smile that mixed pride and a touch of shame. "I never stopped looking for you, darling. I always knew where you were, what you were doing. But I respected your decision to walk away. However, when I found out what was happening at your house, with your husband and his mother, I couldn't stay with arms crossed. Part of me wanted to be angry. How dare he watch me all these years without saying anything? But another part, the part that was still that little girl who adored her father, was deeply moved. What now? I asked, looking out the window as the streets of Seville flashed by. Now, he said, taking my hand in his, we return home. To Madrid. I have built a business empire, Valeria. And I want you to be part of it. I want you to have the life you always deserved. I turned to him, studying his face. I was seeing lines that weren't there the last time I saw him, grey hairs that weren't there before. But his eyes, those eyes that were a mirror of mine, continued to shine with the same intensity as I remembered. What if I don't want to be part of that world? I asked, more out of curiosity than true resistance. Ramon smiled, gently squeezing my hand. Then we will do what you want. The important thing is that we are together, that we make up for lost time. But Valeria, before you make any decision, I want you to see what I have built. I want you to understand the legacy that could be yours. I nodded slowly, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Okay, Dad. Let's see what the future holds for us in Madrid. As the limousine moved down the highway, leaving behind Seville and all the memories associated with it, I couldn't help but think about how quickly life can change. This morning, I had woken up feeling trapped and out of options. And now, hours later, he was on his way to a new life, full of possibilities he couldn't even imagine. I looked at my father, who was now talking on the phone, organizing our arrival in Madrid. His presence, his strength, reminded me why I had admired him so much as a child. And although I knew we had a lot to talk about, a lot of wounds to heal, I felt a spark of hope light up in my heart. The future, which a few hours ago seemed bleak and limited, now lay open before me like a blank canvas, ready to be painted with the vibrant colors of a new life. The trip to Madrid was shorter than I expected, or perhaps it was the intensity of the conversation with my father that made the time fly. Ramon told me about his life in recent years, how he had built his business empire from scratch, facing challenges and overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. When the limo finally stopped, I gasped as I saw the building in front of us. It was an imposing skyscraper, all glass and steel, rising into the Madrid sky like a modern giant. "Welcome home, Valeria," my father said with a proud smile. We entered the building and were greeted by an army of employees, all impeccably dressed and extremely respectful. We took a private elevator that took us directly to the top floor. The doors opened, revealing a luxurious penthouse that took up the entire floor. The view of Madrid from there was simply spectacular. "This is my home," Ramon explained, "and now it's yours too." I walked around the spacious living room, gently touching the designer furniture and admiring the artwork that adorned the walls. Everything screamed wealth and power. "Dad," I said finally, turning to him, "this is incredible. But I don't understand. Why now? Why did you bring me here?" Ramon approached me, his face serious but his eyes full of affection. "Valeria, my daughter, I have made many mistakes in my life. The biggest one was letting you go. But now I want to fix things. I want you to be part of all this." He walked to a desk in the corner of the room and pulled out a folder. "I have built an empire, Valeria. Companies in technology, real estate, renewable energy. And I want you to run it with me." He opened the folder, showing me documents, graphs and photos from various projects and companies. It was overwhelming. "But Dad," I protested, "I don't know anything about business. My life in Seville was simple. I designed jewelry, I lived a quiet life." Ramon smiled. "And that's exactly what I need. Someone with an eye for beauty, someone who isn't corrupted by the greed of the corporate world. Plus, you're my daughter. You have business instincts in your blood." I sat on one of the plush couches, trying to process everything. What if I don't want to? What if I prefer to go back to my old life? My father's expression darkened for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "If that's what you really want, I'll respect it. But Valeria, think about it. Do you really want to go back to a life where you're not valued? Where your talent is wasted? Here you could make a real difference in the world." His words resonated with me. I thought about Alvaro, about Vega, about how they had treated me. Did I really want to go back to that? "I propose something to you," Ramon continued. "Stay a month. Learn about the business, see how things work. If after that you decide it's not for you, I'll help you set up wherever you want, however you want. No pressure. I looked at him, searching for any sign of deception in his eyes, but I saw only sincerity and hope. Okay, I finally said. A month. My father's smile lit up the entire room. Excellent. We'll start tomorrow. But right now, you must be tired. Let me show you your room. He led me through a hallway to a suite that was larger than my entire apartment in Seville. The king-size bed, the bedroom-sized walk-in closet, the marble bathroom, everything was simply luxurious. Rest, my daughter, Ramon said, kissing me on the forehead. Tomorrow your new life begins. When he left, I sat on the bed, overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the last few hours. I pulled out my phone and saw that I had dozens of missed calls and messages from Alvaro. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my email app and started typing, "Dear Mr. Gonzalez, therefore, I inform you of my decision to divorce Alvaro Rodriguez. Please start the necessary procedures as soon as possible. Sincerely, Valeria Mendoza." I pressed send and felt as if a weight got out of my shoulders. It was the end of one stage and the beginning of another. The next morning, I woke up with someone's sound touching gently at my door. She was a young woman, dressed in an elegant uniform. "Good morning, Miss Mendoza," he said with a smile. His father awaits her for breakfast on the terrace. I quickly dressed in clothes that I found in the dressing room, all designer brands and perfectly my size. When I got to the terrace, I was breathless. Madrid's view in the morning was spectacular. Ramon was sitting at an elegantly set table, reading the newspaper. When he saw me, he smiled and got up to greet me. "Good morning, my daughter. Did you sleep well?" I nodded, sitting in front of him. "Yes, thanks. All this is overwhelming." He laughed softly. "I know. But you'll get used to. Now, let's eat. We have an occupied day ahead." While we had breakfast, Ramon explained the plan for the day. We would visit the main offices, would meet the key executives, and would have an overview of how the Mendoza empire worked. "And tonight," he added with a brightness in his eyes, "we have an important dinner. I will officially introduce you to Madrid society as my daughter and heiress." I felt a knot in my stomach. Heiress? Dad, I still haven't decided if I will stay. He took my hand on the table. "I know, honey. But I want everyone to know who you are. I want the world to know that I have a wonderful daughter of which I am immensely proud." His words moved me deeply. For years, I had longed for listening to my father to say something like that. While we finished breakfast, I looked at the horizon of Madrid. The city extended before me, full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of emotion for the future. "Okay, Dad," I finally said. "I'm ready. Show me your world." Ramon smiled, his eyes shining with pride and happiness. "Our world, Valeria. Our world." And with that, we get up to start the day. One day that would mark the beginning of my new life, a life that I would never have imagined possible only a few hours ago. The following weeks spent in an activity whirlwind. Every day I brought new experiences, new challenges and, above all, a new version of myself that was emerging slowly. My father, faithful to his word, immersed me in the business world. We spent hours at meetings, reviewing financial reports and discussing expansion strategies. At first, I felt completely out of place, like a fish out of the water. The financial terms sounded like Chinese and corporate strategies seemed to me an incomprehensible maze. But to my surprise, little by little, I began to understand. More than that, I began to enjoy it. I discovered that my experience in jewelry design gave me a unique perspective in the business world. I saw patterns where others only saw numbers, and my artistic intuition turned out to be surprisingly useful in strategic decision-making. One afternoon, while we reviewed a possible solar energy project, I had an idea. "Dad," I said, interrupting his explanation about implementation costs, "and if instead of traditional solar panels, we designed something more aesthetic?" Ramon looked at me curious. "What do you have in mind?" "Well, imagine solar panels that look like works of art. They could integrate into the architecture of buildings, or even be independent facilities in parks and squares. It would be clean energy and beauty at the same time." I saw how my father's eyes illuminated with enthusiasm. Valeria, that's brilliant. It is exactly the type of innovative thought we need. At that time, I felt a wave of pride and satisfaction that I had never experienced before. It was not only my father's approval that moved me, but the feeling of having found a purpose, a way to combine my passion for beauty with something that could have a real impact on the world. The days became weeks, and before I realized, the month of trial that I had agreed with my father was coming to an end. One night, while we had dinner on the attic terrace, Ramon addressed the issue. Valeria, he began, his voice mixed with a note of nervousness that rarely showed, tomorrow is fulfilled a month since you arrived. I know we agreed that you would make a decision after this time. But before you do it, I want me to know something. He paused, taking a sip of his wine before continuing. These last 30 days have been the happiest of my life. Have you here, working by my side, seeing how you flourish in this world. It has been a gift that I never expected to receive. Whatever happens, I want you to know the proud I am from you and how much I love you. I felt that tears accumulated in my eyes. Oh, Dad, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I love you too. And these days, they have been incredible. I never imagined that I could feel like that, so, realized. Ramon smiled, but I could see anxiety in his eyes. So, have you made a decision? I took a deep breath. At that time, I thought about my life in Seville. I thought of Álvaro and Vega, in the small and limited life he had taken there. Then I thought in recent weeks, the emotion of closing an important treatment, in the satisfaction of seeing one of my ideas becoming a reality, the feeling of doing something significant with my life. Yes, I said finally. I have made a decision. I stay, Dad. I want to be part of this, I want to work with you, I want to be a Mendoza. The expression of relief and happiness on my father's face was something that I will never forget. He got up from his chair and hugged me strongly. Oh, Valeria, he whispered, you make me the happiest man in the world. We stayed for a moment, father and daughter gathered after years of separation, ready to face the future together. The next day, I started the formal divorce process of Álvaro. It was easier than I expected, especially with the lawyers of the Mendoza company handling everything. Álvaro tried to contact me several times, but I had already closed that chapter of my life. Weeks later, I received a letter from Vega. It was a strange mixture of apologies and accusations, ending with a request barely veiled of financial aid. I read it once and then threw it in the trash. That world was no longer mine. My new life was full of exciting challenges and incredible opportunities. I worked hard, often until late at night, but every minute it was worth it. I saw how my ideas came to life, how my decisions affected thousands of people in a positive way. The artistic solar panel project was a resounding success. Not only generated huge profits for the company, but also won several innovation and sustainability awards. Seeing our creations adorning buildings and public spaces around the world filled me with indescribable pride. One day, while walking through the main offices of Mendoza Corporation, I listened to two employees speaking quietly. Have you seen the boss's daughter? One said. It is relentless in the boardroom, but it always has time to listen to everyone's ideas. Yes, the other replied. They say it was she who devised the project of artistic solar panels. It is brilliant. I walked away with a smile on my face. It was nice to know that I had gained the respect of employees for my own merits, not just for being the boss's daughter. 6 months after my arrival in Madrid, my father organized a great party in the attic. It was my official presentation as Executive Vice President of Mendoza Corporation. While preparing for the party, looking at me in the mirror of my luxurious dressing room, I could not help thinking about how much my life had changed. The woman who looked back was safe, strong and successful. I wore a designer dress that I had helped to create, combining my love for jewelry with haute couture. When I went to the terrace, where the party was celebrated, all the eyes turned to me. I saw pride in my father's eyes, respect in our commercial partners, and perhaps a touch of envy in some of the guests. Ramon presented me formally, detailing my achievements in recent months. When he finished, the microphone gave me. For a moment, I was silent, looking at the crowd. I thought about the long road I had traveled, from the young insecure in Seville to the woman who was now. Thank you all for being here tonight, I started. 6 months ago, my life took an unexpected turn. I went from designing small jewels to help directing one of the largest companies in Spain. It has been an incredible trip, full of challenges and learning. I paused, looking for my father's eyes between the crowd. But none of this would have been possible without the love and support of my father, Ramon Mendoza. He not only gave me a chance, but showed me a world of possibilities that never knew that they existed. I saw tears of pride in my father's eyes while I continued. I am excited about what we have achieved so far, but even more excited about what is to come. Mendoza Corporation. It is not only a company, it is a force for change positive in the world. The applause were deafening. While I got off the stage, I thought about the Valeria of 6 months ago, the woman who felt trapped in a life that was not her. I wanted to tell him that everything would be fine, that he would find his way and his true self. That night, while the party continued around me, I sneaked for a moment to the terrace. I looked towards the horizon of Madrid, the city that now called home. The future extended before me, bright and full of promises. I felt someone approaching and I knew without looking like my father. He stopped by my side, contemplating his eyes. "Are you happy, Valeria?" he asked softly. I smiled, feeling a peace and satisfaction that I had never experienced before. "Yes, Dad," I replied. More than I never believed possible. He took my hand and squeezed it gently. We didn't need more words. Father and daughter, united after years of separation, looking towards a brilliant future that we would face together. And so, at the top of Madrid, with the world at my feet and a universe of possibilities before me, I knew I had found my place. She was no longer Alvaro's submissive wife or Vega's despised daughter-in-law. It was Valeria Mendoza, a force to take into account, a woman who had found her power and her purpose. Life had given me a second chance, and I was determined to make the most of it. The future was mine to mold it, and was ready for the challenge.